Let me begin by expressing my deep gratitude for that wonderful traditional ceremony of welcome. And I thank Dr. Tusi Ave Nga Alio. And indeed, we do share much in common in the Pacific. Not only do we share one ocean, we breathe the same air, and we share the same spirits that ride on the winds that we breathe from. Today, and before I begin, I thank you all for having blessed me to begin this task which I must perform this evening. And it is traditional. Before you ever walk into any home, any island, any country, any nation, you must not only get your immigration visa, but you must also get the blessing and the approval of the spirits that reside in a place that you're about to visit. This is traditional, and this is the way that you can come into any place and be blessed. So thank you for that wonderful blessing. And so I will now perform the task that I have been assigned to do. It is not an easy one, because it seems that the expectations have been raised far too high, and I really have a great deal of difficulty living up to the expectations. But let me try in any case. Let me begin by acknowledging our gracious host for this evening, Ms. Janie Babishi, Chair of the PRiMO Navigators, Mr. Chris Chiasa, Mr. Benahuro Lafaile, Dr. Eddie Bernard, Mr. Jesse Sauki, Mr. Dan Walsh, and all of you very distinguished delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, let me greet you in my traditional greetings. And very warm greetings from Kiribati, meaning, may you all be blessed, and I return the blessing that you have given me. Indeed, it is such an honor for me and a privilege to be part of this week's event, and especially to address this gathering where there is a mix of people from different parts of the Pacific, a mix of the traditional and the modern, and a mix of people from different backgrounds and professions. And we are here to address an issue and dialogue on an issue that touches each one of us, no matter what corner of the world you come from. Indeed, it has been apparent from these past years, and even in the last few weeks, that none of us here or anywhere is immune from the forces of nature. Understanding the need to work together and to work collectively is very encouraging, particularly for those of us who have limited resources and limited capacity to mitigate and face the disasters arising from the forces of nature and sometimes from the actions of man. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me this opportunity to express my condolences, and please join me in remembering those communities who have suffered, lost their homes, their loved ones, or are struggling to rebuild their lives as a result of one disaster or another. Today I am reminded that this is the 3rd anniversary of the earthquake in eastern Japan. And we take this occasion also to remember those. I was recently in Sendai, and I saw the devastation, which is still very much in evidence. Gatherings such as this allow us time to contemplate, to reflect, to learn, and most importantly, to work together to find ways and means to mitigate the impacts of similar future events. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year's gathering, building communities of practice for resilience, is one that I believe is very timely and indeed very appropriate. We look back and we note Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. We have observed tropical cyclones in the South Pacific causing havoc in the communities and disrupting the livelihood of the peoples of Tonga, and more recently Fiji. Our small islands in the Central Pacific are not spared. We, those of us who are on the equator, are blamed for creating hurricanes and cyclones. And we send them away as presents, not very nice presents. But let me assure you that we're not immune to the forces of nature. The Republic of the Marshall Islands recently declared a state of emergency only last week. We suffered the same problems from the recent very high spring tides. There was a great deal of damage to infrastructure, to homes, to communities, the waterlands, livelihood of people. And I was considering declaring a state of emergency, but I couldn't follow on after the Marshallese did it, so I had to wait. Maybe next time I will do. But they do affect us in many, many serious ways. Mother Nature, whilst nurturing us most of the time, can also be very unpredictable, and is indeed a force to be reckoned with if she's not pleased. I am sure that you will agree with me that recent natural disasters have increased in force, in intensity, and in frequency. The events of over the last few months, the severe snowstorms in the Northern Hemisphere, the bushfires down under, and all of these herald that something is amiss, something is terribly wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my view that with the assistance, or even the push by men, the forces of nature are now quite different from what they were in the past. They've become less predictable, presenting greater challenges, and will continue to push us to the limits of our capacity to deal with these disasters. We do need to act, and we do need to do it collaboratively. And I'm very happy to have been part of this program, because in this forum, this is indeed what is being promoted, acting together to address the forces of nature when they get very angry. We need to think outside the bounds of convention. In other words, jump out of the box. We need to think outside of our comfort zones, because it is often said that extraordinary challenges require extraordinary and unconventional solutions. Yesterday, during the meetings that I had, I said that climate change is presenting some crazy, crazy problems and challenges. And we have to be equally crazy in order to meet these crazy challenges. I have been perhaps regarded as crazy by some people when I have been advocating living on floating islands, but I can guarantee you why I am saying this is because we are running out of options. We are running out of options. There is indeed a great deal of scope to share solutions. I know that we don't want to keep inventing the wheel. Somebody else has done the wheel better somewhere else. And instead of trying on our own to do it, we need to work together. It is important that we collaborate and share the solutions that some of us have been able to develop much better than perhaps we can do it. Thus far, I've been talking from text, okay? But I want to depart a little bit, and I want to share with you my passion, my obsession, whatever you might call it, which has possessed me over the last many, many years. When I first came into office in 2003, I did not attend the UN General Assembly that year because it was late in the year when I got into office. But I did the following year, and the year after, and the year after that. And my message has always been to try and focus attention on the challenges being posed by climate change. When I was talking at that time, nobody listened. There was so much preoccupation with terrorism, with the economic crisis, with all of these issues. And one day, one of these sessions, I thought, if everybody is so focused on terrorism, maybe I should say something connecting climate change to terrorism. And so I began to coin the phrase, the word eco-terrorism. And in the news, I think yesterday, I saw that there was a man being searched by the police and the FBI, and he was regarded as an eco-terrorist, okay? Now I'm beginning to question, did I invent that term, or was that a term that already existed? But I think the point is, what is happening with climate change is a deliberate product of man's actions. And knowing it, yet we continue to do it. I remember, I want to share experiences. When I was trying still to be heard, and I know that there was so much focus about the melting of the ice caps in the polar region and the impact of that on the polar bears. So I said, oh, they do. These people think about the polar bears more than they do us. And so I said, okay, the polar bears are in trouble, but so are we. We will be swimming in the next decade. I think I managed to capture some attention, but still not enough. And why my obsession, and it is really motivated by the suggestion that even before the report of the fourth assessment report of the IPCC came out in 2008, there was always this hint that climate change would cause sea level to rise. And of course, you know what that means for countries like ours. Every spring tide, we're holding our breath that the waves don't go over. It's literally holding your breath. And you're standing there, and the water is at your feet, and you're moving back. And when the water comes the next time, you move a bit back further. And I can tell you, there is a deep sense of helplessness because there is nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do. And so, that was the reason why we've been so obsessed. Our extreme vulnerability. Because, let me give you some numbers. In Kiribati, the same as the Marshall Islands, the same as Tuvalu, the same as many islands, low-lying islands in the Pacific, the Maldives in the Indian Ocean. Our atolls are barely 2 meters above sea level at the highest tide, no, the highest point. We think that used to be the average. I don't think it is anymore because on average, the water is coming over, maybe during the last high tide, I think it came over maybe 10 to 20% land, more land than it did in previous high tides. And so this is the reason we get very concerned. We get very afraid over the scenarios being projected. The report that I referred to, the fourth assessment report, contains some very alarming scenarios for us, a meter within the century, and then other agencies come out and say that's conservative. It may be a meter and a half. We don't get the good news. The news gets getting worse. And so we have been trying to focus international attention on the issue. At COP in Copenhagen, the Conference of the Parties in Copenhagen in 2009, I had very high expectations. I was invited to a gathering of leaders from the most advanced, and I think I was there with the Prime Minister, President of Bangladesh as the vulnerable countries. But the rest were the United States, India, China, France, all of these countries. And at that meeting, it was a closed meeting. I was very excited and I said my piece, but I was so worried because they were all saying, but you know, if we are to cut on emissions, our rate of economic growth will be in deep trouble. And here I was sitting there among people who were talking about economic growth, so the level of welfare, the level of the standard of living could be sustained. And I must admit, I was fuming, and so I asked, what you have to do is you scribble a note, and you pass it to the Secretary General, who was presiding over this meeting, and so he gave me a slot. And I said, yes, I understand what you're saying. You're talking about your economies. But please understand where I'm coming from. I'm talking about our survival. And I know we're small in number, so maybe we should be allowed to become collateral damage. If that is the way we think, then let us say so. Be very deliberate and say so. Because that is what the result will be. So after Copenhagen, before Copenhagen, when I went to Copenhagen, I went into trouble to meet the chairman, the Prime Minister of Denmark. I said, please, have a meeting of leaders in retreat so that we can thrash out whatever differences we have. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And it was that there was an attempt, a last-minute attempt to do it while everybody was there, and some have spoken. And I remember being asked in the night, come and meet. I said, no, forget about it. It's too late. It's far too late. I came away from that meeting that evening, and I hosted a dinner for the civil society groups who had been supporting, who'd been all around they had to close off the conference area because they were protesting. But there were some that came with us, and so I said, just thank you. And in my frustration, and I think with a deep sense of futility, anger to some extent, tears were, I'm not an emotional person, I'm not. But involuntarily, tears were rolling down my eyes, and I didn't know, but I was so angry. But that was my reaction in 2009. And so I went back, tried to rebuild my confidence, regather the energy, find inspiration to carry on the campaign and the crusade. And I kept going. But I can tell you, my experience has been quite interesting. I find that in gatherings like this, one is able to appeal to the conscience of people, the compassion of people. In my speeches at the United Nations and where I speak to international conferences, I talk about compassion. Climate change being the greatest moral challenge. I had to find these fancy words which would catch the imagination of people in order for them to understand us. But I think my experience has been that governments are a little different from people. And this is the reason I never lost hope, because it is the people that give me courage and confidence. Because when I speak to gatherings like this, the reception and the support is always very positive. But I think it's politicians like us who have a 4-year life till the next election that are too worried about the economic growth, because if the economy goes down, you don't win the next election. But is that the way we should be dealing with life and survival issues? That is the question that I ask. In spite of all that negative, I've been to some meetings, and I've been so encouraged. There's been no date, no timeline for the conclusion of a legally binding agreement. But I can tell you, with a great deal of satisfaction that a lot of progress has been made. And how do I measure that progress? When I started talking about climate change, I was about the only one screaming virtually in the wilderness. But now, as I attend these conferences, I see leaders saying the same thing, arguing and pushing the agenda. And to me, this is so gratifying. And it gives me hope that perhaps there is a future for humanity and this planet. But I can tell you a sad fact. In spite of whatever happens in the future, whether we agree on zero emission, 0 degree, or even a minus reduction in temperature, the small island countries will continue to be submerged on the basis of the scenarios already projected. And the reason is this. You know that. I'm sure you know it. The greenhouse gas already in the atmosphere will ensure that the momentum will carry on to ensure that we will be underwater. So, the challenge of climate change will indeed threaten our very survival. But what do? Do we give up? Can we afford to give up? Of course, never. Because it's not about our future. It's about the future of our children, our grandchildren. I have about almost 10 grandchildren now. And I do look at them when I go on these campaigns because we must succeed. We must succeed. There is no option. The question that a lot of people ask is, so what are you going to do with the sea level rise? And this is why I made crazy suggestions like we will buy a floating island. The Japanese have been looking at it, and I went to look at the design, and but they said, oh, the price tag is about $2 billion. Okay, we don't have $2 billion yet. But I'm hoping that I would promote it on their behalf, and maybe they might give me a free one. I don't know. But I think this is the reality. So the question is, what options do countries like Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, and those that don't have anywhere to move back to, what are their options for the future? Knowing that the sea level rise will ensure that the islands will go underwater. And I can guarantee you, I had a lot of difficulty, and I dreaded the time that my people would ask me, what does the government plan? Because I had no plans. I would have said, there's nothing we can do, and I really cannot think about anything. But over time, I said, no, this is not on. We've got to come up with options. And so we had to dream up options, but the reality is this. With the sea level rise, whether our islands are totally submerged or mostly submerged, the ability of the islands to support our population will either not be totally gone or considerably reduced. And so I am advocating relocation of some of our people. I've been criticized both in country and outside for being anti-nationalistic. But that could never be further from the truth. I am trying to face the reality of the facts or the information being put forward to us by the scientists. So what are we doing in order to deal with that? Okay, I always get misquoted, and I get quite angry because they say, you're going to get everybody off the island. No. We have endorsed a policy which commits us to ensuring that the nation of Kiribati never disappears from the face of the earth. Never. We will build up those islands we can. We cannot build up all of the islands because we don't have the resources to do it. But we will, with or without assistance. Because if that goes, then we might as well go. And so that is part of the strategy. The second component of the strategy, as I said, is relocation. Relocation, and so when I talk about relocation, a lot of people jump and said, oh, you'll become climate refugees. I said, never. We will never be refugees. And this is when I started talking about the concept of migration with dignity, because this is what we must do. In order to achieve that, we must train our people now. And we have begun the process. We are upskilling our people so that those countries, and I know, and I've been doing a study of those countries with aging populations, okay? And there are a lot of countries who will need a skilled labor force because they don't have it. So, but don't tell my other colleagues because they'll do the same. But it's a strategy we've been keeping very secret. But the idea is to train our people and let them migrate on merit now and into the future, so that when they migrate, they will be people with skills, they will be worthwhile citizens in the communities they adopt, and they will be able to make a contribution. They must never be a burden on the communities they go to. And above all else, they must always move and go with dignity. It is absolutely important, because having lost your home, having lost whatever, the one thing that nobody could ever take away from you is your dignity, your pride. And this is what we're talking about. A lot of questions come up, but they ask me, so what happens then? I said, no, don't ask me that question. You can ask the next leader, because all I want to do is provide choices for our people now. But the plan has already begun. We are training our people with assistance from our partners. And it's a win-win situation. I know a lot of countries in the Pacific, on the Pacific Rim, are actually getting workers from abroad on a yearly basis. I know in Australia, they bring in 30,000 to 40,000 people from Asia. And I've asked one of the former prime ministers, you're doing this, why are you not doing it, taking our people? And his answer was said, oh, but your people are not trained. So train them. So that is the strategy that we have adopted. We are committed to ensuring that Kiribati never disappears. I want to take this opportunity because it is rare. When I was in Uganda once, and I had a meeting. It was during a meeting, and I was, again, we were debating about this climate change. And again, it's like when climate change is discussed in a meeting and people start talking about economic growth, I start getting agitated, and I can see, if I was a dog, I think the bristles on my back would be up, but I become so predictable. So I jumped in, I said, no, it's not about economic growth. And after the meeting, one of the African heads of state from the Gambia, I believe, he said, oh, we didn't realize you had such a problem. Well, we do, and it's becoming more frequent. I mean, what we are facing are becoming more frequent. And he said, oh, we'd be willing to have you. And I checked up on the Gambia. I believe a lot of it is desert. So what? We will have desert if there is nothing else available. So if we have any deserts anywhere, let us have it. I know. But unfortunately, the head of state has already passed away, so I cannot follow up on his offer. But I want to say that our situation seems so futile. But we must never, ever give up. We talk about resilience. And I'm asking, let's have some resilience here. Never believing that we can be defeated. Let's have psychological, spiritual, mental resilience. It is important. Because faced with this kind of adversity, when you really are finding nowhere to turn to, you really have to draw on the reserves of whatever stubbornness you have. be very unreasonable, because this is what is happening is not reasonable. So you've got to come up with the most unreasonable solutions. And so that is it. But if and when we have to leave islands, those that must leave, I think we must teach them from now a certain degree of resilience, a certain degree of stubbornness, so that we can demand of them that they never forget who they are. They never forget their identity, their culture, where they came from, and above all, their dignity. We believe in very close association with the land, because when we come here, we look for blessings from the spirits of Hawaii. When we go to another country, we look for the blessings of those spirits, because each people, each country have the people have that link between them and the spirits who reside in the country where they are born. We share that. We call our spirits by different names, but I believe in the Pacific they're all one and the same. We just call them by different names. As I said, I want to take this opportunity to announce to you an offer that was made to Kiribati only recently. I invited the President of Fiji a couple of weeks ago on a state visit, so he came to visit us, and maybe we welcome him so well, but he delivered a very powerful message. And he said, we know of the challenges you are facing with climate change. We know what it means for your future, and we can assure you that Fiji is ready to stand by if and when required to receive your people. We hope that will never happen, but we have bought land in Fiji, okay? And people ask me, oh, you're going to move your people to Fiji? I said, no, I won't say that, because everybody will panic. But what I've said is it's an investment. And so we are looking at every option, including the idea of floating islands. Is not a joke. It's a realistic option, because failing everything else, we don't want to leave our islands. And if those that will have to, there will be those that must remain to ensure that we continue to exist as a nation and as a people. PRiMO indeed offers the opportunities for this interaction. And I say with some regret that I wished we'd been here before. Because when we were trying to work through these solutions and this challenge, it was a very lonely path. Very lonely indeed, because it's unprecedented. It never happened before in the history of humanity. Oh, it did maybe during Noah's time, but that's a long time ago. There were no immigration, there were no borders at that time. But I think if we'd had the opportunity then to be able to interact, I can assure you our burden would have been much lighter, because that burden is shared amongst our brothers in the Pacific. And so I thank you for this opportunity to share this. By no means is it over. The journey is still in the process of unfolding. The challenge continues to unfold, because we don't know precisely in what form it will become. And these are the best solutions we can offer at this moment in time. Nobody else has been able to come up with a better alternative, but I challenge this gathering to come up with options. And I can assure you, if you can find me an option which would ensure that we do not leave our islands, oh, I'd love you to the end of the world. But thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you our pain and the challenges that we've been going through. But I can assure you that the welcome and the blessings and just sitting together here as as brothers and sisters to share the burden that we go through at different times in our countries. It's indeed, it takes a great load off our shoulders. And I know that in my discussions over yesterday and today, I know that there are solutions out there which we know nothing about. And so if you do have it, please engage with us. And in concluding, let me share with you our very traditional blessings. And these blessings are always done in our traditional rites. And they bless you. If you make a mistake when you're doing your rites, you will be blessed regardless. And so on this occasion, let me share with you our traditional blessings of Te Mauri, Te Rai, a Te Tapmoa. And thank you.